Hi. This morning I had a dream, and following that, there was some interesting process that I went through, and I thought that's beneficial, number one, for myself, and maybe if anyone's listening, to understand who we are, what we do, why, and how we may be able to find a path that satisfies us as well as the whole universe, not just the whole humanity. In other words, how to be aligned to the way of the universe, the laws of the universe, and be able to use the brain. And usually, what I see is that we live in the brain. Do this, do that, do this task and that task. We may access briefly to come up with the idea of what to do, but otherwise, just like going through the computer process on the web, A to B to C, and or filing for the tax or the legal document, that you follow certain rules, and like a machine, we process that. And that, to me, is necessary as human for us to maintain the state and be able to process the people previous to us had found that these are the important things. Just like the kids are growing up, listening to parents and friends and uncles and whoever surrounding him, to digest the way they think so that you can communicate. But kids are playful. They just don't want to stay and listen to all this stuff, even though they may be punished every now and then. They want to be creative and having fun and challenge what the limit is. And to me, that's very important, to not lose that sense of being a child, even as an adult, because once we get into this molded way of mechanical response, input, output, like a machine, that may be meaningful to maintain certain state, but may not provide ways so that as human, as the individual, to grow continuously. As much as living beings was found somewhere in the universe and on the earth, and generated from that is amoeba or whatever the organization developed, and the fish and trees and lettuce and monkeys. And we can go back and see how the DNA has been made longer from the smaller piece of being alive, as if to add on to the lessons learned from the environment to live better. And that's the way I see us being here. Thousands of years ago, our level, the world's logic, were limited. And certainly we have learned how to use the brain and the logic so that we could live longer and be happier, in the sense of eating and going places we want to go, and have new relationship with each other, and so on and so forth. So there has been the evolution. There's no denying about it. But along with it is the suffering. And I think Dalai Lama mentioned pain is inevitable, but the suffering is an option. And when you think about it, suffering compared to pain, which may be felt directly, like cutting the fingers or the stomach ache and all that, the suffering is mind created, often in delusion, because of the craving or aversion of certain issues or being ignorant, we forget things and then we found ourselves not doing the right thing. So delusion is the cause of suffering, and that's what Buddha mentioned. And all the religion has the orientation to figure that out, using the concept of God or the Amida Buddha or whatever the term. Infinite wisdom and compassion. And there's a gap between human to that infinite potentials that is the one that brought us here at this stage that I'm talking and you're talking. Yet we are incomplete because this growth of the brain and the neurons and the words and the logic, it's expanding, and we see the expansion further facilitated by AI. And if you look at AI, deep learning, it's interesting. It seems like going forward, but going deeper in ourselves too. The term deep learning implies that we have the history, the huge database, experience base, and that we can access and synthesize instead of just playing the mechanical process of do this, do that. Because there's a limitation of that way of making judgment and thinking, so that when we hit the wall, as I mentioned, suffering, something happened and we get upset, cannot solve it. We hit the wall, there's no way out. What do we do? And some people kill themselves when they hit it, while others may suffer for a long time. And if you look backward of how they may have developed, there are certain habitual patterns that mind have developed, and part of that, or major part of, maybe called ego. And if you push your ego without understanding of the reaction to what you push at, like hitting the head onto the wall, let me get out of here. There's no way out. I'm upset. Why did it happen? I should have done it. But you cannot retrieve the time to go backward to redo it. And so that stays. The scar remains, and that gives us certain bias if not treated. And there's a trauma, and these things happen. So this morning I had the occasion of those images popping up in the brain as a dream. We can talk more about it. But the point is that we are to keep evolving. And what is the way? If the AI helps us to identify areas for us to find the path into the future, because the AI can connect to all the database from the Bibles and this document, that document, all the written literature may be now programmed into or as a database to search for the answer. And if you get blocked, go down deeper and deeper to see what is feasible, and they can come up with the answer. And when that happens, aha moment that we feel, so that we can connect to that. So on one hand, we may have this habit pattern develop, and if we are not using our mind well, we get stuck and very unhappy, upset, regretful, whatever can happen. And you can say that's just the part of human. That's so true. But we are also looking for the ideals to get better. And the AI can help. Religion, in the sense of spirituality, is also to find what this infinite intelligence and compassion that may have brought us here and is living inside of us. can do something to help us live a life and a continuous process. As the environment changes, and we learn, and therefore we also change. And we change, and the environment may respond to that. And there's that relationship of us, human, to the environment. As much as also mentioned about the brain may be developed, but we may connect to the root or the huge database that we may have accumulated with AI, or the root of where and how and why we become alive. And the DNA capturing the intelligence of the past, and this DNA is moving forward in the sense that some of the AI may help play with this DNA so that if you have a flaw in there, maybe we find a way to fix it so we can live better. But the point I mentioned about the delusion and suffering may remain as human. But we can use the AI. Also, the point that I want to share, the spirituality, to understand where we came from, who we are, and what we do. The insights given and shared by many people from the past, we can relate to that so that we don't just get fixated to a certain way of thinking, but expanding. And for that, while the deep learning may help, but similarly, we can go down deeper into your unconscious to become conscious of unconscious, and then come up with a wisdom and compassion. So that's the passage, and if we have more of that capability, the use of AI can be multiplied in its benefit. If you cannot have the connection to the deep database, and I use the word the heart, the origin of where we came from and how we accumulated those experience base and the learning can be utilized, then the suffering can be moderated, even though it may not go away, but we may find a way. So, as I mentioned elsewhere, Maslow's hierarchy, as we developed and evolved from taking care of the basic needs of being alive to achieve the self-actualization. Maybe it's an endless aim, or endless pursuit, like reaching the star, unreachable star. Yet, if we can handle that suffering to be reduced, instead of killing ourselves or damaging with each other, the wars and abuse of the machines and tools, we may find a harmony and a happy living. So that's the basic idea. Instead of just status quo. Acceptance is important, but just to end this video, let me follow this up later with another video. But I just want to mention acceptance with calm and quiet mind, everything as it is, without reacting to whatever goes in our mind. Therefore, no self-identity. Leave the self alone and leave the thinking going on alone, Just observe everything as it is, detached. Then, as the surface of the water may be settled from the suffering and reaction, and then we can see down deep the connection to where we came from and the source of wisdom to help us because of the clarity. I call glass wall management instead of brick wall, instead of silo, A to B to C and blocked with each other, but also hierarchically, information cannot process and the idea doesn't connect to the whole. We can synthesize those potentials, talent, memories, and all of that, as if the brain and heart has opened up its bottleneck, that it's not a silo, one against the other, but rather even the brief moment, channel. And when that happens, as in the case of the dream I had mentioned this morning, the dream indicates something is self-organizing from the past to say the message is this or that. And when you not jump up and move on to do the task and go through this, what to do next and so forth, but have a space and time to see and accept what's going on. Then you may open up this bottleneck, I call it, between brain and heart. What's in the mind and what's in the body and all the happening behind. Have a way of connecting, kind of like massaging and loosening up and the bottleneck open, and therefore you start to understand what's going on, why, what can be done, what's feasible, and come up with the idea. And I think that process is quite interesting and important for us to grow instead of becoming a servant of the setting, but we become the master of our destiny, involving what's unconscious, become conscious, connecting to the heart, the brain, and all the database and synthesizing so that we find the passage into the future, be the master of destiny. I think that's the challenge. While we want to look outward and next step, we may need to go inward to assure that things are organized and aligned instead of all the information not processed and stuck up here and there, and the picture is murky and unclear, as the case of the water waves settling down, and you become more transparent to see who you are, how things happen, with the energy coming up and the ideas coming up and the compassionate sense coming up, even to ourselves, we find the passage. Not from the mind, but from the heart, connected to the mind, as if we revisit the Garden of Eden and eat the apple, fruit of knowledge again. And go beyond the confinement of the mind or the habitual pattern they may have the negative impact to form our personality. We can recreate us to find a way going forward. Now I see it's raining outside. let's have a time for Samadhi, calm and quiet mind, so that the brain and heart has a way to connect each other on their own without us rushing or pushing, but let it resolve from within. Thank you.